everyone, and welcome to Around the Verse. I'm Sandy Gardner, and with me is Star Citizen's game director, Chris Roberts.
Hey, Sandy. So thrilled to be here, of course. I'm actually going to be heading off to Europe this Sunday, so over there for a few weeks. So you'll have other hosts here with Sandy going forward for a few weeks until I come back. But
speaking of Europe?
Yeah, speaking of Europe, look what we got from a fan in Switzerland. He sent us lots of sugar, obviously. Swiss Toblerone, Swiss caramel, Swiss knife.
From Zurich, Switzerland, Martin Whip.
Yeah, and sent us a t-shirt from his organization. Thank you very much.
Check this out.
Yeah.
Bold.
Yeah, pretty. I'm not that brave to actually get a real Star Citizen tattoo on my arm, so.
I'm not either. But
very
well
done and very impressive, and thank you very much, Martin. But anyway, back to the show. So today's show is going to be about something very dear and near to my heart, the game's AI.
That's right. We got Tony Zurevec and Francesco to sit down and answer a few questions about how players will be interacting with NPCs in the game. But that will be coming up later in the show.
First up, we have our weekly studio update from Nick Elms and our UK team.
Hi everyone, welcome to another studio update from here in the UK. My name's Nick Elms, I'm the creative director here at Foundry 42. As you might imagine, since the 2.6 release, we've been very busy trying to get 2.6.1 out for you. There's been a lot of bug fixing, a lot of feedback that we've taken on board from you guys, and John Crew and Andy Nicholson have been looking at incorporating a balancing pass now with all the feedback we've been gathering from you guys in the community, from you playing 2.6, and they're making a comprehensive review that hopefully we're going to be getting into 2.6.1. We're going to look at the Mist Razor next, which I think you saw in November for the concept sale. It's now with the ship team, and in particular Joe Neville, who's working on it through its white box stage. As part of the ongoing VFX polish and optimization, we're going to take a look at the Drake Caterpillar. We've been working on the throttle up and down engine effects, and with the Herald, they've been working on the explosion effects. This is the kind of stuff that we sort of send around the office on a daily basis, and we thought we'd share it with you guys so you can get an idea of what we see. And as you'll see here, the VFX guys have shared us a V-roll of all the ship weapons firing simultaneously. Surface Outposts is what we're going to take a look at next, which I think we've released a couple of snapshots of, but it's starting to come online a lot further now for us in the form of the building sets that we're starting to get through from the artists. The designers are particularly excited now about all the gameplay opportunities that these will afford as they can actually lay them out on the planet's surfaces now for you guys to investigate. That wraps it up for another UK update. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of work still going on behind the scenes with bug fixing, optimizations, and feedback, etc. All that remains really is me to say back to LA and see you in the verse.
Appreciate the update, Nick. Excited to see where the building sets are headed. I mean, that stuff looked fantastic. A lot of great stuff in there.
Definitely, no kidding. And the effects team have been doing is really impressive, especially the Herald explosion. That was very cool for me. And as we're seeing all the ship weapons lined up like that.
Yep, definitely seeing things shoot and blow up is always very cool. Nick also mentioned all the work going into 2.6.1. If you want to learn more about the up-and-coming patch, make sure to head to the website and look at our full production schedule to get a sense of what you can expect. And we'll be updating the schedule every Friday until the release, so you can track our progress via our website.
And of course, a lot of the changes and rebalancing that we're doing right now are thanks to the fantastic testing that our backers have been doing since 2.6 went live. So thank you to all the backers out there.
Absolutely, yeah. Your feedback is invaluable to the project, so I definitely want to encourage all backers to keep playing Star Marine, Arena Commander, and Crusader, and to keep letting us know what you think on the forums, Issue Council, as well as on Spectrum. And please, if you haven't tried out Spectrum, try Spectrum its beta, because we'll be going live with that soon. It'll help 2.6.1 and 2.6.2, and after that, all the subsequent patches to be as good as they can be.
And as many of you know from our newsletter, we recently had many of the directors and leads over at the LA office for several weeks of discussions. While that was going on, we took advantage of everyone being here to record some deeper conversations about what we're actively working on.
Yep, absolutely. And as the game's AI system is one of the most complicated and groundbreaking features that we're currently in development on Star Citizen, we figured it would be a great opportunity to have lead AI programmer Francesco Ricucci and Persistent Universe director Tony Zurek give an extended discussion about the systems they're building.
I'm Tony Zurek. I'm the director of the Persistent Universe for Star Citizen.
So I'm Francesco Ricucci, and I'm lead AI programmer for Star Citizen. So yeah, we work a lot together.
Yeah. I'm predominantly focused on the architectural side of the stuff, what the basic capabilities are, how we expose that functionality to the designers so that we can get, as much leverage, from the development process as possible. This includes working on, the actual, developing the editor itself, which was the designer's interface.
Well, I take all the architecture from Tony, and we make it real in the code, basically. We develop both the code, we architect the code, and we implement it, and then I manage other 3 people so far in the AI team. So we have Andrea Garbone, Mario Sarine, and Rich Welsh in the UK studio. So we are a bit in Germany and a bit in UK.
The current state of AI in Star Citizen is that we're basically, I would say we're cresting the hill with regards to the initial tier of architectural functionality. Francesco has now, got a lot of work to do to basically take all of that, distribute it to his guys, get that working within the game. And what we're aiming to do in the fairly near term is to be able to, for the first time in significant fashion, to be able to start exposing this functionality to the designers, and they should have enough of the base, the base capability to start crafting actual missions within the game. It's going to look to some degree like the missions you've seen before, except that they should be able to create them much more quickly, which means we won't be talking about 17 missions. They'll be able to, you'll be talking about, much larger, potential number of missions. You'll be talking about a lot larger number of different things that you'll be trying, you'll be able to, problems that you'll be able to present, to the player. You'll be talking about a lot more content that's going to have an algorithmic component to it. For example, right now, locations tend to be fixed, and we're going to be introducing in the not too distant future the ability to go down to planets and stuff, and we don't want you to always encounter a derelict spaceship with, a stranded pilot that needs to be transported to here, always in the exact same location. When you go to pick up that stranded pilot, we don't want him to always necessarily be friendly. When you go to pick him up, we don't always want him to be alone. Sometimes it's going to be an ambush. Sometimes he's going to need medical attention. And so these are things, all just within the course of that one, with that one basic scenario, which is distress signal, crash, pilot, etc. There's a world of opportunity for us to actually create a range of interesting, potential experiences for the player. And this is what, as soon as basically Francesco has basically integrated the rest of this, and I'm sure there's
no pressure on me.
Little bits and pieces as we start to try to mock up some of these, the first tier of these subsumption missions. But as soon as we've got that, then we'll finally start to get a sense as to what the designers can create with this.
I think it's always this first step, right, of getting the car there that is, in a state in which you're not only happy with the architect of the code as well, because for me, it's a lot, I know I can rely on the vision of Tony for the architecture of the design and all the other designers that we have, because, all very talented people. And the code as well needs to be architected in a way in which you can scale, as much as possible. So the big, work we've done so far has been to make sure that, subsumption runs, in a really good acceptable amount of memory usage, and CPU usage. So we have all this concept of, activities that are actually templates that can be reused between a lot of characters without creating instances everywhere, or having the mission system that as well reuse as much as possible from the subsumption architecture. So you don't have to recreate the same logic over and over again in different systems just because uses different systems, and also accessing content from one actor, to the mission and, pass information. It just becomes very much quicker. You don't have to go through different DLLs or, each DLL can expose different functionality without you to have to add code, between like completely different structure, and then you have to, how do I expose this part to this other system? It just becomes everything much more fluid and, much quicker to add stuff. So yeah, that's some time. It takes a bit of time, but then I think we are starting to arrive to the point in which we are very happy of that. We're discussing the last bits that you added, for example, this concept of adding some kind of reusable piece of logic that you can recall. And for us, it's kind of very easy now to implement that. And every new functionality seems it's always quicker to add. And you kind of start to feel like, yeah, we're doing a good job here. Or at least I don't like to say it, myself, but I think it's good when you are happy of the work you're doing. And
that's something I referred to before, which is we're very much focused, and we always have been, with regards to the direction we're going with the concept of this object-oriented content creation, which is to basically distill all of the different pieces of functionality that we're going to use to build up these larger missions, to break them down into all these component parts, and then just like you do in an object-oriented language like C++, to basically allow us to pass inputs in, to extract outputs out, so that we can customize them dynamically in these in the scope of a much larger problem. And so what this is going to wind up allowing us to do is, after we've got that initial library of functionality, designers are going to be able to craft this stuff much more quickly than they've been able to do certainly in the past. And what this effectively means to the player is a much larger amount of interesting things to see and experience and challenges to face, and solve within the game world. The first part of subsumption, the easiest part of subsumption to basically expose, is actually going to be the mission side of it. The mission side is basically built on on top of the what you want to call like the lower level AI layer. There's a lot of commonality in terms of how we do message passing, the data structures, the concept of functions, reusable parameters, and all of this type of stuff. Task archetypes, with which we build up the solutions to these problems. The mission stuff in general is a bit more straightforward to expose, because it doesn't directly control any of the animation stuff. And the animation, when you're talking about a modern 3D game, animation, even though it's not technically part of what most people would call the AI, it plays a massive role with regards to how people perceive it. If you have a bartender and he's going about doing his business, but the pathfind, is
smooth.
The pathfind doesn't operate very well. He goes right up to other characters and then does 90-degree angles around them, as opposed to doing nice splines. If he basically doesn't align himself precisely, if things don't snap right to his hand, if he can't actually operate things in believable fashion, then he doesn't actually look intelligent. Even though under the scenes he's still able to search for this, he can still basically go over to it, he can still utilize, he can still create items, he can still send messages, receive messages, query the environment, all that type of stuff. And so one of the big issues that we face before we really expose the AI side of it is we want to make sure that a lot of these, you could call them cosmetic issues, because they really are predominantly isolated from the AI itself, although the solution to them is occasionally quite complex because they're still so tightly integrated. Like, by way of example, one we've talked about before is you've got a pathfind, and in combat you've got a character and he's running towards cover, and he actually needs to know in the pathfind that he's running towards cover, and he's in a combat situation, and then he's basically going to modify the end part of that pathfind, he's that running to that destination by sliding into cover. And if you're talking about a character that's actually going to manipulate something or sit in a chair, they need to know how they need to be aligned, so that while the pathfind, the predecessor step is in action, it can be taking that into account. So, because what you don't want is them to get to the end point and then spin 80 degrees, and then basically to play the appropriate animation and stuff. And so the mission stuff is the first and easiest, but given the release schedule, and we can't talk too much about that. We've had some conversations about whether or not we might have a small iterative release that might expose some of this for testing purposes. But we'll just have to talk about that as we announce that later.
It's also like subsumption is like it's really global, general name. So I think we probably when the mission system is out, well, it's part of subsumption. So they will basically start to experience what subsumption is in general, right? But yeah, as Tony said, most of the animation issues are the one that we are basically working on before we can show something, or not too much before we can show, but before we want to show.
That's exactly
because I think that's the critical part. It's like for me, I think we are both very critical to the work we do. So it's always this doesn't look very good. I don't want to show it.
And this was one of the big things with the Squadron 42 vertical slice, to where one of the largest issues was the animation integration into the system, as opposed to whether or not you were under the hood actually doing all of the appropriate AI logic. The AI logic, a lot of it was
it's
actually
a
operational.
good point, because the subsumption logic, it's already, we have then our gain, our builds. I mean, we already use the activities, we already use sub-activities, we already have secondary sub-activities running, people, say hi to you, greet you, seeing from far, having different activities.
Right, but we were having problems with the heads weren't orienting correctly. And
if you show something like that,
you show that, it looks much more primitive than what it really is. And so that was one of the reasons, why up until the very end we were like, well, how quickly can we tie up some of the most egregious animation issues?
Because you kind of make sure, you want to make sure that something that it can be very impressive, it actually is. Because otherwise, if you ruin the look of something that is actually quite complex, quite advanced, with a bad look, then it's hard to remove that type of first impression, and it's not smart, and it's not I don't think it gives the right credit to the system.
We want the quality of the integrated animation to match the ambition
system,
of the actual
the
logic, and that's that's still going to require some effort. 3.0, I think we're actually going to aim for a pretty diverse, set of things. Most obviously would just be starting to make the landing zones actually start to feel alive, so that you encounter, a variety of different, characters, all pursuing, their own particular, set of interests. This will include everything from, the prototypical, bartender and bar patrons, tourists, vandals, businessmen, various
vendors,
shopkeepers, muggers, criminal elements, things of that sort, and then some of the more interesting stuff in terms of the gameplay potential, I would say, would be the combat aspects.
Because the combat is, of course, it's what I already worked on, and it's something that I'm really happy to work on, and I want to push it even further. It's that is gonna be interesting, because we try to make this first iteration on it where there is already coordination between the guys that fight, people that can advance while somebody else covers from the advancement from a cover spot, or if no cover spot are allowed, they will just. I think the main thing with the combat that I'm really trying to push is the fact that they understand the environment, and you are sure and you understand that what they are doing makes sense for the type of environment in which they are in, and that is gonna be, I think, what is cool in this scenario, because maybe you'll find some pirates on the side, you want to get a good deal, but then they turn on you, and then the fight makes interesting, the situation.
And this will play into a number of things. So when you encounter, right now, the only ships, as you're just generally wandering around stuff, you tend to encounter. Is really other players and stuff. And that should be dramatically different in 3.0. Not only different in terms of you encountering them, but in terms of what you can do with them. If you disable, if you're transporting cargo and you basically get attacked by a pirate and he disables your engines, then it's entirely possible that he's actually going to try to board your ship, or vice versa. If you're a mercenary, or if you're a pirate and you're basically trying to basically take out a freighter, then part of what you're going to have to do is, after you basically disable the ship, is board it, and those characters will actually be able to, fight, to fight back within the confines of their ship. And this is, again, just going to open up a world of possibilities in terms of making, the world, space, et cetera, feel much more alive.
Kind of unique as well, because I think it's it creates these kind of scenarios that are not very easy to find somewhere else. It's gonna be a very, very interesting to see how the players will play.
Thanks, guys. Hopefully that gives you a better sense of the progress we're making and gives you an idea of how awesome the final version can be. As more and more of the features like the AI, the mission system, locomotion for player and AI come online and are implemented into the game, we're able to unlock more opportunities to push the boundaries even further and create that first-person universe that Star Citizen is going to be.
And we know that AI has been one of our most asked about topics from the community, so we decided to open up the conversation to the community and let Tony and Francesco field some of your questions about how it works.
Multi-crew ships will operate fairly similarly to the hierarchy, the chain of command that you'd see, in a typical, civilian or military vessel. In that you'll have a captain, and the captain will tell the navigator where he wants to go, and the captain will basically tell the engineer what to prioritize, whether he needs the weapon systems back online first, or the shield generators, or the engines. And he'll basically, dispatch, the chief medical officer to deal with medical problems in this area or that area. So it's at a very high level. I've said before, it's like we don't want to, be sim citizen. We don't want to have too much micromanagement in terms of control. That's not the type of game we are. But the concept of being able to just generally prioritize things, and then to have your lieutenant characters basically address those. And this actually segues nicely into how players are basically going to be integrated into the equation. If you've got a captain, and you've got a navigator, and you've got a chief medical officer, and you've got a chief engineer, and you've got a chief weapons officer, and all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden the player wants to one of your player friends wants to basically deal with weapons or deal with engineering, then you'll have a very easy means of factoring in how the other characters are going to interface with them. And what you're going to wind up getting out of this is a nice, concise system to where you can customize as much or as little as you want. You can basically have you can basically recruit NPC characters to do as much of the work that you or your friends don't want to do as is necessary to accomplish the job.
Yeah. Basically, really moving away from one behavior for one ship. So it's really like each seat will be controlled by the people that just want to work on that seat. So I think there would be really the crew feeling, working on the spaceship, as Tony already said. And I think that is the only way to also give a bit more realism, in the sense even if you board a ship and the pilot is trying still to bring the ship somewhere and you kill him, then you don't want that, the spaceship has this kind of external behavior that still drives automatically, or controls the turrets anyway. You just want to really see that something is there. And then I think we are also trying to make this type of AI modules that you can buy and assign to specific seats. So it's like you don't have an actual crew member sometimes, but you want to have kind of small computer that controls the turret, for example. So some stuff, maybe the medical officer cannot be substituted by a computer, but the turret can have a controller, an automatic controller. And if you just sit down, then you can immediately take control over the things, turn on and off. And I think you as a player, you are also able, to customize a bit how the ships automatically responds to things, and can be, really cool, because you can have just the combination of, that you can have that already makes a huge difference between one ship and another.
The advantages of AI crew versus human crew, I wouldn't really say that there's definitive advantages. I would say, the devil's always in the details. What you will have as a player is the ability to recruit NPC characters to fulfill specific jobs on your ship. But when you basically go to recruit them, that's where the details start to matter. How much are you willing to pay? And that's going to determine the level of quality, the level of professionalism that you're going to get from that particular member. If you want a turret gunner that's really effective, then you're going to have to pay a higher monthly salary. You're going to have a higher running cost. And so what you'll see a lot of players, and this exact same scenario exists with players. It's like some will be more adept at a given occupation, given skill. Others will be less capable. And so what I think you're going to wind up seeing in a lot of cases is players. You may have a ship that's ideally crewed by 6 or 8 or 10 people, and the player's party will basically take on those roles that they're best at, and then they'll basically recruit NPCs to whatever skill level they can actually afford to basically fill the remainder.
It's about the interest, right? Because maybe some players have interest on piloting, some others have a really good interest on shooting, and then you can use the AI to just fulfill the roles you don't like too much. But on the other hand, the AI won't rage quit on you, right? So you won't have player disconnecting, and so. Yeah, but you have an advantage with AI.
Well, and that's true. Whereas most of the things that players will actually do will depend upon their actual capabilities or their ship capabilities or their equipment's capabilities, to expose things. But how well you basically can fire, for example, at another player, your accuracy, that's determined by your physical dexterity, and it's influenced by the weapon, which may have more or less kickback or a wider area of effect, in terms of its damage, etc. And NPCs will have a variety of characteristics that will model how well they deal with all of these different things that the player has to handle themselves.
Yeah, the skills would definitely be a huge part on deciding this NPC is good at doing specific jobs, but maybe you have 2 that are kind of good at the same job, and you still need to fulfill another role, and you put the one that is I still need the shield management, even if none of them is pretty good. But maybe after a certain amount of mission, he starts to get used to that, and he starts to improve his skills as well. So, you can decide pay a bit less, but I risk a bit more at the beginning. I try to make simpler missions so I get used to these things, and I think that is also interesting to see how the player will use their strategy to both balance the hiring and the other NPC they have with how they can improve and learn.
It becomes another resource to manage, another way by which players can differentiate their style of gameplay versus another. Do you go with 3 engineers of lower quality or 1 really stellar performer? So there's going to be a multitude of ways for you to customize the gameplay experience via the choices you make in all of these different areas. There's no real limitation, just given the distribution of responsibilities. It would really just be more along the lines of the larger ships will require larger crews to operate effectively, and therefore their running costs, on average, will tend to be higher than ships that can be operated with a much smaller crew. Obviously, you can modulate that to some degree with the quality of the crew you're hiring and things of that sort, but there's no hard-coded limit, and there's really no reason why there would be, given how all of these tasks and responsibilities that they're going to be executing are going to be.
I think that is really coming from to the fact that basically really this individual behavior are controlled by a captain or something like that, but then each of these NPC will just do its job. So there is no real limit on the amount of people that execute their job. If you have 5 seats to control 5 different turrets, there would be just 5 different people. Their coordination, of course, it depends on the amount of targets they have, who they can target. But that it doesn't matter if there are 3 or 5 or 15, because the code would just scale for that. It would try to distribute the targets. But so it's
as you go to the upper echelon of ships, you're going to probably need more experienced, better commanders, because they're effectively going to be in control of more, of a larger number of crew members, and we'd probably just model it such that if you basically get a lower quality of chief engineer starts to basically buckle under the pressure, and he starts to make bad decisions, etc. Once he starts to get beyond 3 or 4 or 5 guys that he's controlling, exact same thing that you'd see in the real world. It's always been our intention to allow the player to form long-lasting relationships with all of the characters in the game. What this means specifically is that you will develop, what we call reputation in a number of different fields. Are you known for, your acts of piracy? Are you known for your, humanitarian missions? You're basically very medically oriented, and you're rescuing people, healing people, solving, medical crises, et cetera. Are you really well known for, how effective a transporter you are in terms of commodity goods and things of that sort? You got a very high success rate in terms of getting it done. So there will be those reputational aspects that characters will be able to of yourself that characters will be able to query to determine how much they like you, dislike you, whether they want to offer you the more advanced missions or just the starter missions, what they're willing to pay you in order to do that, etc. There will also be these what I call like these many-to-one relationships, to where it's not based upon your piracy rating or your transportation rating. It's based upon your specifically one-to-one relationship. How do they feel about you? Did you take a specific mission from them? That's probably going to be weighted much more significantly than stuff that they heard that you did for other characters within the universe. They're also going to be able to take into account the organizations of which you're a part. Do they like that organization? Do they hate that organization? Are they neutral with that organization? And so all of these things together are basically variables that the characters within their conversation logic can factor into how they respond to you. And then we'll wind up having these things gradually return to a baseline if you don't keep doing it. In other words, if you're an exceptionally good at transporting merchandise, very high success rate, if you haven't done that in a day, in a week, in a month, then people will no longer be talking about that behind the scenes, and therefore you would expect that reputational aspect to gradually deteriorate over time, and you're going to have to you're basically going to have to keep doing that type of thing and keep doing it well if you want to maintain your standing with the community in that regard.
Yeah, it's all like for me, especially on the I team, what we try to do is like to expose all these functionalities to make sure that the designer can create as much content as they can. So once we have these things that we got the relationship variables or attributes, it's really like a matter to give these to the designers, and then designers can use any of these, like can be the reputation, can be this, what they feel about you, and they can just create all the logic, that they want. Plus we are kind of in a unique position because like the game can constantly be updated, so these characters can also get new responses, based on the state, and there is all this new content that we can create with time that just makes the relation always more smooth, and you can go deeper into details and mention other stuff that you've done and mention events that have happened. If I have a good relation with you, maybe I gossip about something with you, and we can create this and always add more and more and more. So
yeah, and there's the stuff that really matters in terms of the missions they give you, whether they'll talk to you at all, of that stuff, and then there's also just the more cosmetic stuff. Are they telling jokes? Are they more lighthearted? Are they basically bantering on about their history because they feel comfortable with you because you've done 3 missions for them within the last week? Are they frowning at you as you go? Are they repulsed by you? Are they disgusted by you? All of that type of stuff. So I would say you've got different elements coming together, which is not just how they explicitly react to you, but more just they're more subtle behavioral characteristics with when you're in proximity. For the future of AI, I think that we're clearly going to head more and more towards the algorithmic generation of content. That does not mean by any stretch of the imagination. We've said from the very beginning, it's like we don't want to be pure algorithmic. We have no interest in being purely algorithmic. We don't think that makes for a good gameplay experience. It just makes for good taglines in terms of, hey, let me give you an arbitrarily large number of this, but it's all it's all bland and uninteresting. There's nothing really handcrafted to draw you into it. And so what we've been pursuing for years now is basically the ability to create all these handcrafted pieces and then to allow the designers to build on top of those, to link those pieces together to create very quickly what seems like incredibly customized missions, but they're able to do it in much more rapid fashion than would otherwise be the case. And so I think what we're going to wind up having, as you go forward, is just the ability to algorithmically create more and more, variations on these things, but you're not really going to notice it in terms of the quality of the content. It's just going to look like you went from 12 designers dedicated to doing this to 24 to 36 as you basically refine all those algorithms and you start to get your base library of functions and stuff all entirely operational.
Yeah, the other thing I think we can talk about as well is like this way of, I think what I would like always to push further is this kind of realism if you want to start to follow one guy, for example. And, we start with something like, the guy will live in the planet, but maybe, eventually you will have this guy that even change planet, and he will be able to understand that there are connections between, jumping into a spaceship, take the spaceship, fly, use this quantum jump and go into this other planet and then go down and search for another bar. You can just follow it and then it will be always more realistic. Like, I think that is, from the tech perspective, we will have, of course, lots of optimization, multi-threading and stuff like this that we want to have, like just to have as quick as possible. So I think there are like these two parallel, work that we are doing, both on, content production tools, to create always more and give more feeling, and then like all the technical problems that we are trying to solve, like using object while you use another object, sitting on a spaceship, and while you are sitting, you actually interact with all the object, and each of these interaction triggers something else. I think these are all things that we're gonna eventually have in. It's the details, it's an amount of details that you will eventually have based on all the different iterations. So the first iteration will have, even on the combat side, first iteration will have, of course, some sort of coordination, but then other iteration will have always more and more coordination, using more type of weapons, being smart and know which type of weapon is best in a specific environment or in a specific scenario. And I think this is just gonna give like always more realistic feeling.
Well, yeah, because another long-term objective, and this is not within the next 12 months, it's more of a 12 to 24-month window type of thing, is basically support for what we refer to as the persistent dynamic NPCs. And what we mean by that is there will, of course, be specific characters at specific areas, within even the persistent universe. Certainly within Squadron 42, but we'll have those types of characters even within the persistent universe. And then there will be another class of characters that are just created as you wander around the world. You encounter you're basically transporting a load of commodities from one planet to a refinery, and you encounter a pirate, and that pirate winds up inflicting significant damage, and you wind up having to call for help. And once your help arrives, you basically just hightail it and get out of there. This is the kind of thing to where what we want to eventually be able to do is to keep the essence of what that character was, that pirate. What was his name? What does he look like? Was he talking to you on the radio? What voice were we using for him? What was his rank? What was the source of the interaction that you had with him? What's your history? He basically got the better of you in a battle, and then we want to be able to use that as an input into this library of mission content, such that the next time we're looking for a pirate to basically be utilized in one of these mission archetypes, we have the possibility to insert him as the specific character, and he then has the ability to refer back to that prior history. And so what you wind up having is your own little custom version of the world, to where these are characters that we didn't specifically go out and hand create and give a history to, but you're encountering them, you're interacting with them, made them real, made them persistent for you. They're also, of course, persistent for any party members that you've got. It's like everybody can see them, but those particular characters that you've interacted with in a certain way become available for us to utilize when we need an equivalent character as you encounter lots of different scenarios within the game world.
Well, I think other things that I also look forward is even the wildlife on the planets. That's gonna be really interesting, because it's something I worked a little bit before on Crisis. We had some little wildlife, and there is always like this big difference for me between like the smart wildlife and then like the more simply cystic wildlife. Like, if you have a frog, well, you don't expect the frog to be super smart. You can create this kind of, what the cryogenic boids, animals that can move around and they react to your presence or your proximity, but not much more. But then you have other things like pets or, even just bigger animals like, a deer or something like this that that they're smarter and they need to do something with you. They're not as complex as a human, but they're pretty complex. And to give the actual feeling of a planet, I think we will have to tackle all of these things, and it's going to be very interesting.
But it's just like with the cities, to where you want to basically make this world that you're traveling through look as alive and as interesting as possible. Because if, like right now, what I'm sure bothers us all is just the fact that we've got a great big world, but we're not yet able to effectively populate it with, a lot of interesting material for the player to see. And we've talked in the past about how, we've got 17 missions, in the game right now, in the persistent universe that you can go and accomplish right now. But those were implemented in a completely different fashion than what we've been, aiming, to eventually be able to do. But these systems are such that you need to have maybe not the entirety, but a significant majority of the base functionality operational before you have anything. And so what makes me, most excited about, 2017 is just the fact that we should start to get this stuff that we've been talking about on the content generation side finally into the game. And this is where all of a sudden the ability for players to start to, do a variety of different occupations and for them to just, fly around, orbit around the moon, and, content that we didn't explicitly put there will be able to to fill in, and there will actually be interesting stories and and things to do all littered throughout the entire system. And so I think that once we get 3.0 is supposed to be the initial iteration of pushing this stuff out there, and then all the successive releases are just going to be refining, basically taking advantage of this system that we've put in place. And so I think that Star Citizen in the 3.8, the 3.x iterations is going to finally start to look like a real finished game, to where you can just go in and lose yourself for hours and hours at a time. And that's not because you're marveling at just the technological ambition of the project. It's because there's actually enough gameplay content in there to keep you interested.
And for me, it's also like, because after when we have that, we can actually see how the player plays with the game. Because I think like the most interesting thing for me to work in games is the fact that you produce something that people actually play with and they interact with. It's not that you just give it and it's not that only. It's like it's really how you use it. It's like how you play that, and the game plays with you. So I think at that point you can also start to tweak things. Say, this is how people likes to do. What people likes to do, and people like the way they like to play. And then you can adjust things and give more content here, so I think that is going to be very interesting.
I can foresee us using spectator mode quite a bit to actually see how players are interacting with all of this, initial set of mission content that we're going to be placing.
Mode.
Yeah.
Always great to hear more about how NPC crews are going to work. It sounds like it's been a huge undertaking to develop a system this complex.
It's definitely a huge undertaking, and we're still hard at work at it, especially Francesco and Tony. We really want our NPCs to have complex behaviors, you would expect. So the work Tony, Francesco, and the rest of the AI team have been doing is vital to our plan moving forward of creating this immersive Star Citizen and Squadron 42 first-person universe. So once we have the foundation in place, we'll be able to tie it into the mission manager and the mission system itself and create some really emergent and immersive scenarios, either by scripted design on the designer's side or through sort of systemic or procedural generation that's in response to player or AI behavior. So I think it's going to provide some really cool and unique gameplay.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of ATV. And as always, we'd like to thank our subscribers for contributing to the creation of all our in-depth behind-the-scenes content.
Yep. Thank you guys very much. Thank you for having patience with us being here doing all this. And a huge thanks to all our backers who are supporting Star Citizen's development. So you guys are a big part of what makes the project so unique and special, and we definitely could not do it without you guys. So thank you very, very much.
We could not. And if you would like to hang out with more of the team, make sure to tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific for the latest Star Citizen Happy Hour stream to watch some live gameplay and discussion.
Yes, not quite sure which one of our devs will be there, but they'll be there, and it's kind of a cool opportunity to have an informal sort of Q&A and discussion. But until then,
we will see you
around the verse. Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.